He was the strongest dragon, but reborn as a human with all skills maxed out. If you like my recaps, Unruly Family, subscribe and smash that notification bell. An ancient dragon is killed by a human and is reborn as a normal man in a quiet village on his deathbed. Chained and wounded, he reflects that he never did anything to deserve such treatment from humans. At times, this dragon had even been an ally to them, but now he suffers at their hands without justification. Despite being severely injured, he breaks free from the chains in his mind. Perhaps none of it matters anymore. Maybe his life has simply been too long, or maybe this is an unworthy end for such an ancient divine being who has lived since the era of the gods. At this point, he only wishes for the Reapers to take his soul to the underworld so he can rest forever. And then his life ends. We are then thrown into a scene where a baby is born under peculiar circumstances. Magaru, who oversaw the birth, believes that this newborn possesses some extraordinary talent. While the parents are enchanted as their child opens his eyes, the mother names the child Dolan and introduces him to his older brother. Years later, Dolan has grown and is helping with household tasks such as gathering supplies. One day while working, a girl calls him to come home. Her name is Eri, and she's worried about him. She asks if something is wrong because his mind seems to wander off with the sunset view. Dolan gently strokes her hair, assures her that everything is fine, and they walk back together to live in Bahrain, a small village on the northern border of the continental kingdom of Arkrest. Aware that he was a millennial dragon in his past life, Dolan now lives as a typical peasant in this humble region whose sole industry is agriculture. Every day he goes to the fields, working hard to earn his daily bread. In this village, one is considered an adult at 15, the age when peasants are expected to live on their own. Dolan left his parents' house at 16, which is how old he is now. One day while fishing, a friend asks if tomorrow is the day he's going to investigate that swamp. Dolan confirms and adds that it's been a month since the lizards disappeared from the swamp, so something must be done. The friend argues that this should be the garrison's job, not his. But Dolan counters that Captain Balin and the others are busy protecting the village. The friend asks if he's sure he doesn't want company, but Dolan declines, saying he's just going to take a look. Just then, a fish bites the bait, and a battle ensues, but Dolan emerges victorious, returning to the village with a bucket full of fish. He is praised for the great catch, though a girl thought he'd be getting ready for tomorrow. He explains that he's been preparing little by little over the past few days, and that her help in persuading the village chief and the others was invaluable. She replies that since Dolan always helps with training, it's all good. Dolan asks if Melita and Albert are training now, and Melita confirms, mentioning they'll be holding a meeting about the next children's training, while Albert advises Dolan to prioritize Ty's tomorrow's investigation. That evening, Dolan prepares a fish for dinner, reflecting on the many monsters and bandits surrounding Varen, but notes there aren't enough soldiers in the village to provide the same protection one would find in a city. It's expected that the peasants themselves help protect against threats. Meanwhile, Eri reminds Dolan that it's magic practice day, and the two head off for the session. At the training grounds, Dolan points his hand at a straw target and shoots a blast of energy.
Energy Bolt!
Destroying the target and putting on quite a show. Eri is thrilled by this, and Meguru praises Dolan's offensive magic for being flawless as always. Dolan credits his master's training, and she announces it's time to practice healing magic, a type of spell where the boy struggles. At dusk, the village chief introduces Dolan to a woman named Christina, a young noble woman who will be staying in the village for some time. The old man asks Dolan to behave in front of her because of her status. Christina greets Dolan and their eyes meet his. Intense blue and her pulsing red as she walks away, he imagines she must be quite skilled. Afterward, Dolan returns to gathering supplies, pondering the fact that in this village there's always the risk of freezing to death in the winter and the unbearable heat in the summer. Reflecting on this, Dolan was shocked to learn that humans live in such a hostile environment. When he arrives home, he is greeted warmly by his brother Marco and their parents, showing off the basket full of food. He earns a smile from his mother, pleased with the abundance. Naturally, dinner was ready, and everyone ate with enthusiasm. Dylan's father comments that living alone may be relaxing but also lonely, so he advises his son to find a wife, as Dylan did. But Dolan prefers to enjoy his single life a little longer. His brother brings up the swamp Dolan will visit tomorrow, and their mother worries about the dangers he might encounter. Dolan reassures her that he's only going to take a quick look. His father adds that Dolan is an adult and can make his own decisions as long as he returns safely to ease his mother's worries. To that, Dolan is confident nothing will go wrong, and he'll even have a great story to tell. The next morning finally arrives. Captain Balan still believes he should accompany the boy on this excursion. However, Malada argues that it doesn't make sense since if the monsters attacked, the village would be left without its captain. Letitia offers a simple blessing from the goddess, while Megaru warns that her fortune reading showed a small hint of something bad on this journey, so Dolan should be careful. Aerie made lunch for him and handed it over. With that, Dolan bids farewell to the village and sets off on his journey. As he walked toward his destination, he found himself thinking about how the swamp lizards used to interact with the village of Verum from time to time. However, one day, they simply stopped showing up. That's when Dolan volunteered to investigate the reason, even though he had no idea what he might find. At the end of his journey, he arrived at the swamp and placed his hand in the water. With some form of sensory technique, he realized that the lizards could no longer survive there because the power of the earth elementals had grown too strong, while the water elemental power was weakening. He knew very well that Lady Magaru's divinations were usually spot on, so he had to stay alert. Speaking of which, he suddenly heard noises in the woods surrounding the swamp. To survive in a place like this, whatever it was had to be a pretty tough creature, so his attention sharpened even more than out of nowhere. A lamia appeared in front of him. In other words, someone who was half human, half snake. It was certainly not what Dolan expected to see, but since she had appeared, it confirmed the rumors the village had spread about this creature, rumors that all spoke of her unparalleled beauty. She asked if Dolan was alone, and he confirmed it. This seemed to relieve bulimia, though she wasn't quite sure how to proceed. Maybe she should try using those seductive moves her mother had taught her so many times. She gave it a shot, but in reality, it was far from being the kind of dance that would make someone feel attracted. In fact, it had quite the opposite effect. At the end of her awkward performance, the lamia assured him she wasn't there to fight, but a gigantic creature emerging from the swamp didn't seem to share that intention. When the massive monster threatened to crush the lamia with its hand, she could only scream and brace for death. However, Dolan sliced through the opponent's wrist, stopping the tragedy from unfolding. Naturally, he pulled the woman away to escape, but the monster was determined to block their way. The girl asked what that thing was. Without answering, Dolan covered her mouth and told her to tuck in her tail as it was sticking out from under the mushroom they were hiding beneath. After a while, the monster gave up and left them in peace. Dolan then explained that the creature was a deranged earth elemental. There used to be humanoid lizards that lived in this swamp, but one day they all disappeared, and that thing was probably the reason. Dolan had heard there was an earthquake some time ago, which had likely affected the elements. Unfortunately, there was no way to reverse what had happened. Changing the subject, he introduced himself to the lamia, who revealed her name was Celina. Dolan then asked if all lamias could use magic, and she confirmed they could. In that case, the human suggested they team up to fight the elemental, but the woman panicked. Lamias were earth creatures and wouldn't be much help against a monster of the same element, though there was one lamia spell that might work on an earth elemental. Dolan offered to go ahead while she provided support, to which Celina responded, saying she would stand by him in sickness and in health. He chuckled and asked if that wasn't something people said when they got married, to which she apologized for the slip. Then Dolan charged to the front lines, while Celina wondered if she could really work with a human she had just met. Regardless, the boy gave the signal, and the joint attack began. Dolan deflected the first few earth projectiles the monster threw at him, and Celina seized the opening to curse the opponent with a spell called Jerome, which summoned a colossal serpent that coiled around the enemy and bit its head. However, Celina couldn't hold this magic for long, so the human had to act fast. Knowing this, Dolan rushed at the elemental. Even though the monster managed to shake off the serpent, he dodged the new projectiles, climbed up the creature's head, imbued his sword with draconic magic, and sliced the elemental in half. With the monster defeated, its muddy body spread across the land, splattering Celina and covering her in filth. Dolan checked on her and, after confirming she was fine, extended his hand and invited her to dry off her clothes. Soon, they gathered in an abandoned village and cooked a meal. Celina mentioned how the boy had seemed afraid of her, and he replied that she seemed different from the lamias he knew, as they were usually more cautious of humans and, as a result, more aggressive. He then added that there weren't any lamia villages around, so he asked what she was doing in the area. She explained that when lamias turned 17, there was a rule in their species that they had to go out and find a husband, as they were an exclusively female species. Rarely did they give birth to a boy, and when they did, it was always of the father's race. Lamias had been created when a human woman was cursed, and that curse had been passed down, which was why they were part snake and had venom. As such, they needed husbands who were resistant to this substance. Even her mother had found a human husband, and the two got along very well. Listening calmly, Dolan remarked that Celina was a very adorable lamia, but she got angry thinking he was treating her like a child. Dolan laughed at her reaction and served her a portion of food, and Celina was so delighted by the taste that she worried she'd gone too far with her praise, which embarrassed her. Easing her nerves, Dolan thanked her for the compliments and mentioned that his mother had taught him how to cook. Celina observed that he smiled gently when talking about his family and suggested he must love them dearly, which triggered a memory of his old life. The solitary dragon in the cave was long gone, and he needed to accept that. At dawn, he said goodbye to Celina, and knowing that lamias liked vital energy, he shared some of his with her. However, Celina collapsed from the intensity of the dragon's power. After the awkwardness, he helped her up and abandoned the idea. With everything settled, he invited the snake woman to visit his village once she found a husband, and the two parted ways, heading off in separate directions. Sometime later, a guard and a civilian from the humble village of Dolan spotted a woman crossing the bridge toward Varen. The civilian remarked that it was dangerous for a young lady to travel alone like that, but she assured him there was no problem as she was stronger than she looked. After all, she was just a humble lamia. Once they realized she was a snake woman, the men fled in a panic, not daring to look back, leaving Celina frustrated by the reception. Meanwhile, back at Dolan's house, Magaru was teaching him and Eri the basics of magical medicine. Unlike regular medicine, magical potions are made from ingredients infused with magic and must be prepared with great caution to be effective. In the worst case, even the smallest mistake could be fatal. Just as she finished explaining this, Dolan made his first error, and the teacher chuckled, commenting that the young man wasn't very good with more delicate tasks. Arya encouraged her brother not to get discouraged, noting that he had a keen eye for medicinal herbs and was great with children. Finally, somewhat shyly, she added that besides all that, he was also handsome. Dolan thanked her for the compliments, but admitted he struggled with following complex recipes, acknowledging that he still had a lot to improve. As for the Eri mixture, Magaru found no fault with it, so she sent the girl off to play outside. Eri, however, preferred to help her mother and left once excused. During this time, Dolan reflected that having been a dragon in his past life, he never needed any kind of medicine, which explained why he wasn't skilled with delicate things. Despite the young man's frustration, Maguru assured him that he had first-class offensive magic, but was still struggling with magical medicine nonetheless. The teacher reminded him that there was no need to rush. There are no shortcuts in life. Dolan had talent, and the obstacles he would face along the way were simply part of the journey to reaching a new level. He recalled a phrase Maguru often said, "Correct knowledge and small deviations." She reinforced this lesson, planning to teach him how to turn his poisonous failures into antidotes. Later, Dolan went to have lunch at Eri's house. After being invited, the girl's father offered a prayer in the name of Myrail, the goddess of nature, thanking her for her generosity. During this, Dolan reflected that it had been a long time since he had last seen Myrail. After lunch, Dolan hurried off, realizing he had stayed longer than he should have. Before reaching his destination, he was stopped by Mew, a bovine. She asked if today wasn't his training day, and he confirmed that he was running late for that very reason. In the end, she offered him some milk as the semi-human shared her milk with the villagers, who all loved it. Dolan himself confessed that it tasted wonderful, but announced that he had to leave. However, Mew insisted, holding out a mug for him to drink from. After a brief hesitation, he drank it with gusto, then took his leave. Nearby, Christina watched as Dolan hurried across the field. Sometime later, he finally arrived at the training grounds, where 3 younger boys were practicing with spears under Albert's supervision. Dolan apologized for being late, but the teacher wasn't upset. On the contrary, he smiled at his friend and called for a break. The kids quickly gathered around Dolan to show off their spear skills, but the older man told them to come back after the break, leaving the youngsters disappointed. Suddenly, Dolan sensed the presence of a monster nearby. Albert noticed his friend's strange behavior and asked what was going on, but Dolan brushed it off, saying it was nothing. Later that night, Dolan returned to the forest, searching for the source of the feeling that had struck him earlier. In his mind, it was definitely a monster, and possibly a familiar one. Following his senses, he ventured deep into the woods until he spotted Celina bathing. The lamia was startled and nearly hit her head on the ground after stumbling, but Dolan was there to prevent the worst from happening. With everything in order, the man asked what she was doing there, but Celina couldn't speak, feeling too exposed, so she asked him to close his eyes. Dolan didn't understand why a Celina was such a beautiful woman, and being looked at wouldn't diminish her beauty. Annoyed, the lamia couldn't comprehend how he could be so indifferent to this. He calmly explained that desiring beautiful things was a natural instinct, and there was nothing shameful about it. That said, Dolan soon appeared with a handprint on his face, apologizing for his lack of task. Since Celina had gotten even, the man zoomed, questioning why she was there. After all, she had said she was going in search of a husband. Celina admitted that was the plan, but things hadn't gone well so far, so she decided to visit Dolan in his village, as traveling alone was difficult. Dolan was delighted she was there, and promised to do everything he could to help her. Speaking of which, he came up with the brilliant idea that they should live together, which left Celina in a state of panic. After recovering from the shock, she asked if he was serious, given that she was a monster. Dolan explained that in his village, there were many beast people and demi-humans. While the villagers might be wary of Celina because she was a lamia, her powers and kind personality would surely win their trust, allowing her to live peacefully in Varen. Surprised, Celina hadn't imagined she could befriend humans. Dolan then confessed that her presence would make his life much more pleasant. Reflecting on his own words, Dolan wondered why it felt like he was courting this maiden. However, regardless, the invitation had already been extended and duly accepted by the girl. Speaking of which, Celina confessed that she had another reason for seeking out the human. In truth, she hoped she could share a bit of his life energy with her, as she had never felt such a delicious energy that made her feel so good on this matter. Dolan assured her that as soon as they started living together, Celina would have whatever she wanted. He then extended his hand to seal the deal with Dolamia. As soon as she responded to the gesture, he transferred a little of his life energy to her as a free demonstration, and the poor thing got excited from the tip of her tail to the tips of her ears. With that done, Dolan explained his plan to Celina. The next day, the captain and a few subordinates assessed the third consecutive day of mysterious attacks on the village, where animals were killed and left behind, along with a strange sunken trail in the ground. Regarding this, they believed the culprit might be that half-human, half-creature shadow they saw last night. In other words, a lamia is an extremely dangerous being feared by humans. What the captain couldn't understand was why she left her prey in the village instead of taking it to eat without delay. The officer warned the village elders about the threat lurking in the territory. Everyone wanted to understand why a lamia appeared in this region, as it rarely happened. Captain Balan suggested forming a squad to eliminate the creature once and for all. However, one of the leaders pointed out that the village had too few people and it would be too risky. Therefore, they needed to request reinforcements from the capital, which meant sending a messenger immediately. Meanwhile, Dolan overheard the conversation while working with Albert gathering wood, reflecting on how deep the divide between humans and monsters was to him. It was sad to think that a woman like Celina, so kind and gentle, would be hated by people just for being who she was. Back at the meeting, Magaru urged everyone not to panic and acknowledged that Melon was deeply concerned for the village. Still, she explained that the lamia was probably leaving the animals as offerings to the village and suggested they should try to understand why. At that moment, Eri arrived at the meeting with the results of the divination suggested by Magaru. The elder carefully examined the strange pot and concluded that Eri had reached the same outcome as her. In other words, the divination predicted that the appearance of the serpent was a good omen, and everyone should wait to see what happens. Hearing this, Dolan celebrated the decision and rushed back to Celina at the end of the day, knowing he could now move forward with the final part of his plan. Upon reaching her, he informed Celina that the offering plan had worked, and then explained the next step. The following day, Balin explained to the other soldiers that a lamia had been spotted in the area, so a new training session would be held that day to keep everyone sharp in case something happened. The children were captivated by the captain's imposing presence, especially Toro, his son. Meanwhile, Dolan pondered that this was the core of Varen's defense, and these were the people who would help with the final part of his plan with Celina, including the captain, the lieutenant, and even the priestess Letitia, who could use healing miracles and antidotes. However, since she was considered a messenger of the goddess Myrael, Dolan needed to be careful not to make her see Celina as a threat, as that would mean the end for her. In any case, the rest was now up to the lamia. Knowing this, the poor thing trembled in fear nearby. The night before, Dolan had planned for her to save him during training in the burrowing rabbit territory, as he would purposely enter the animal's den, then give the signal to be rescued by Celina. However, despite the plan, a guard came rushing during the training to report that an armored bear was approaching. Without delay, the gigantic beast appeared in fury. Dolan ordered no one to attack, as a blow from the beast could cut a human in half. The problem was that Toro was defenseless and very close to the bear. Dolan quickly sprang into action, jumping on the boy to prevent a tragedy. At the same time, Celina suddenly appeared, jumping onto Dolan to shield him from the beast's claws. In response, the lamia cast a spell on the bear, ordering it to return to the forest, stunning everyone as the beast obediently followed her command. After getting rid of the bear, Celina asked if Toro was okay, but the captain doubted the lamia's intentions and threatened her. Dolan argued that she had saved him, and Melita agreed. Still, Balin remained suspicious. He questioned why the lamia had been leaving offerings in the village, and why she had saved Dolan and Tero. Celina explained that she had saved them because their families would be heartbroken if they died. With that, Celina bowed and pleaded to be allowed to live in the village, explaining that her father was human and had always loved her mother. Upon hearing this, Valin asked Letitia for her opinion. The priestess received a message from the goddess Myrael stating that the lamia before them was not a threat and that everyone should live in harmony. She then approached Celina and noted that the creature was keeping her eyes closed to calm the human's fear of curses. But she gently asked the young lamia to open her eyes because everything was all right. However, Celina was gravely injured and ended up fainting after some time. Celina recovered and was given a house to live in. When she visited her new home, she was touched by the kindness she received from the villagers. There was even a plush mushroom inside the house and ideas suggested by Captain Balin himself. Speaking of him, Balin apologized for pointing his weapon at Lamia, as she had saved his son's life. Aerie asked Celina to share everything she knew about her species so they could learn how to take better care of her. Similarly, Celina wished to learn all she could about the human race. Finally, Dolan pretended not to know the serpent and extended his hand as a greeting. She cried and responded to his gesture, and with that, Dolan welcomed Celina to Varen village. As the days passed, observing the daily routine of the newest resident in his life, Dolan felt happy about how quickly she had adapted, and because of this, he felt indebted to his old friend, the goddess of nature, Myrael. One night, after a long time without doing so, the young human used his astral form and ascended to the skies to meet her. In no time, responding to her friends, Carl Dolan appeared in his draconic form to talk about Celina. At first, Dolan was surprised that Myrael had recognized him in his human, and she explained that she had sensed the dragon's soul through the prayers offered to her. Likewise, she was also surprised to notice the renewed energy with which Dolan was now living, since he had always seemed so weary of life. In fact, the creature admitted that he hadn't felt any despair when he was on the brink of death. However, when he was reborn in that village where he now lives as a human, Dolan realized that the people there live as if each day were their last. Though some celestial beings might see human life as fragile and short, humans burn brightly with great intensity. Speaking of which, Myrael observed that the dragon was now shining just as brightly. Finally, Dolan thanked the goddess for everything she had done and continues to do for him. At dawn, Celina woke Dolan in his home, full of excitement because today was the day they had made plans. Dolan understood her enthusiasm, but asked the girl to at least knock before barging in. Embarrassed, she apologized for her mistake and noticed that the young man seemed quite happy that day. He mentioned that he had dreamed of a friendly sheep who had spoken kind words to him. Putting that aside, he asked Celina to remind him what was planned for the day. She frowned before remembering that they were supposed to plant potatoes with Christina, and she would be quite upset if she found out that he had forgotten about it. Meanwhile, in a large city, a boy was selling newspapers featuring the latest updates on the case of the missing women in a beautiful palace in that city. Walking through the vast corridors, a woman arrived at a large door where a stone fairy acted as a sort of receptionist for an office. Inside, Director Olivia, a beautiful woman with pointed ears, awaited the arrival of a young lady bringing correspondence from Christina, the pride of the institution. Olivia opened the letter, which contained a report on Christina's stay in the small village of Varen. In the letter, Christina described how this northern territory of Galoa was facing severe weather conditions that threatened the safety of its residents. As a result, combat training was essential for those who lived there. We are then taken to one of Christina's training sessions, where she faced Melita, the local vice captain, impressing all the onlookers with her remarkable swordsmanship. Realizing the challenge was more than she had anticipated, Melita decided to fight harder, but she was brilliantly disarmed by her opponent, driving the crowd into a frenzy. Afterward, the victor helped the vice captain to her feet, and Melita graciously acknowledged her defeat, praising Christina's performance. Likewise, Christina spoke highly of her opponent's skills with equal enthusiasm until Dolan. Equally thrilled by the successful exercise, Melita invited everyone to lunch together, and the captain urged the villagers to show great hospitality to the guests. Reflecting on this, Christina wrote to Olivia about how the people of Varen were extremely kind and welcoming, quickly making her feel part of their community. During lunch, Christina was offered all kinds of food, certain that she would enjoy them, as everything she had eaten in the village so far had been excellent. Curiously, after serving her, the two ladies stood admiring the new for being so beautiful. Balin arrived to invite her for a drink, and Melita jokingly warned him not to drag her into one of his wild drinking sessions, promising instead to stick with his two friends who would have to endure him all night. That night, as Christina lay in bed, she felt a certain unease. Looking out the window, she saw Balin and his friends laughing and having fun. At that moment, she went out to train alone with her sword, practicing both the art of war and the art of solitude. On that same day, Dolan and Celina had arrived, and the lamia wanted to know if the human was going through some problem, as she seemed visibly on. However, when Christina denied it, Celina grabbed her hand with determination and invited her to her house. Not knowing how to refuse, the warrior accepted the invitation and followed the girl there. Upon arriving, Celina excitedly explained that her favorite part of her humble abode was her bed full of pillows, which always helped her have sweet dreams. In fact, Celina thought the human would be happy if she slept in that bed too. Dolan intervened, pointing out that while the bed might be great for lamias, it might not necessarily work for humans. Embarrassed, Celina apologized, but Christina decided to try it for herself instead of just listening to the opinions around her. Without hesitation, she flopped down as if she had suddenly collapsed, grabbed one of the pillows, and admitted that it was indeed a very comfortable place. Later, Celina confessed that the invitation had been Balin's idea, as she had been very afraid of not being accepted in the village. However, the more she lived with these people, the more she fell in love with all of them. For example, the captain himself took great pride in the milk his wife produced, and the villagers often competed to see who could drink the most. Regarding this, Christina commented that this explained why everyone had gone to the captain's house earlier. Celina added that Dolan's older brother was a skilled fisherman who once caught a salmon as large as a building. The friend hadn't imagined that fish that big lived in the river, to which Dolan replied that each villager had their own quirky way of being, like Melita, who was a soldier on the outside, but had a great love for sweets. Dolan was about to continue talking when the girls interrupted him, pulling him into the bed with them. He put up a mild protest, but the two literally dragged him on top of them, and the trio burst into laughter. The next day, the milk season had begun in Varen, with the only source of this special beverage in the region being the cooking of the captain's wife. With her secret techniques and skills, she served the entire village with a smile on her face. Even Dolan couldn't miss the festivities this time, joining Balin, who was eager to see who could drink more than him. Finally, it was time for Christina to join the milk celebration, excited to try this drink that everyone in town adored. Thrilled to have another customer, Miu went to prepare another mug. Without delay, the milk was served to Christina, and the warrior downed it in one gulp. After finishing, she acknowledged that the drink was as delicious as people said. Seeing this, Balin commented that the swordswoman was an impressive milk drinker, but she would never match his skills. In response, Christina made it clear she didn't want to see him crying to his mommy after she drained all the milk in the establishment. Soon, the truth would be put to the test in a competition between the two professional drinkers of Verdun. Mug after mug, they went head-to-head in a fierce contest. But over time, Balin started to struggle to push down more of the drink, even though he was always considered the master of this skill in the village. In fact, he simply couldn't take any more. And with that, Christina became the champion of Verdun, a peculiar victory that brought her great joy a little later. Despite having consumed so much, the warrior remained standing and kept drinking with her companions. Miu approached and made a somewhat strange request to the contest winner. She wanted Christina to try the milk made by her daughter. Miu had hoped her husband would be the first to taste it, but since he had sadly passed away, the honor would now fall to Christina. With that, Christina grabbed the bucket of milk and drank it without even flinching. Quite the opposite, she confirmed. It was indeed excellent, very sweet and flavorful, just as she liked it. In fact, she wasn't satisfied and asked for a little more. Overjoyed, Miu embraced the human ingratitude for her support. As she received this slow-motion hug, Christina reflected on how, thanks to Dolan and Celina, she had grown closer to the people of the village, making Varen a more cherished place in her heart with each passing day. After Olivia finished reading the letter, the lady who had delivered it became intrigued by the story of Christina being friends with lamia, just as a man knocked on the door to enter. Soon after, upon descending to the ongoing party, the headmistress of the Magic Institute announced to her friends that a student had formed a friendship with lamia. Some of her colleagues were skeptical about this story, claiming that it was rare for humans and monsters to have such relationships. However, Christina's actions had spread so widely that others had no doubts about the feats of this woman. In fact, a woman named Karen personally questioned her about the lamia everyone was talking about. Given that Karen was a magician working for the central government, Olivia didn't understand why she was so concerned about a lamia. Karen then explained that the worry came from the threat the creature could pose, even if it was just one. After all, there had been a series of disappearances recently, and it would be unfortunate if another bad story spread throughout the kingdom. Olivia countered by saying that the lamia had been seen by the goddess Myril herself as a divine message of peace and unity. But Karen insisted that everyone should still prepare for the worst and asked which jurisdiction Verdun fell under to see if Celina could be summoned to Galoa. At that moment, a man appeared, claiming to be responsible for the jurisdiction in question and stating that he would send an emissary immediately to handle the situation. Meanwhile, Dolan, Celina, and Christina were planting potatoes as planned when a soldier summoned the three of them to the village gate. Immediately upon arrival, the village chief pulled Christina aside while Gouda, the Northern Frontier Commissioner, announced that the lamia must be taken to the government to prove she was truly harmless. The villagers reminded him that the goddess Myril herself had declared the lamia a good sign, but the commissioner still needed to follow official procedures before releasing the creature. At least he granted Dylan's request to accompany his friend. After the convoy's departure, Christina planned to speak to the headmistress as soon as possible, knowing she held great influence in the central government. So, using her selfie boost ability, she quickened her pace and set off. Meanwhile, Dolan asked if Celina was feeling any pain from the carriage ride, as she wasn't used to traveling that way, but she reassured him she was fine. He then promised that the government's procedures wouldn't take long, but Celina was more concerned about the trouble she was causing for the villagers. In response, Dolan embraced his friend, saying that's how his mother used to comfort him. Celina began to cry at the kindness shown to her, and Dolan reassured her that everything would turn out fine. Back with Christina, she arrived running at the headmistress's office to report the commissioner's visit to Verdun. Olivia explained that in fact, it was Karen who insisted the lamia be taken away, and that she might be involved in the recent disappearances. Furthermore, if the mage pushed too hard to incriminate Celina, she could be in serious danger. Suddenly, in the middle of the night, a soldier from Gouda summoned Dolan and Celina for an unexpected meeting. I appreciate you viewing my anime recap, Unruly Family. Please let me know what you think about this anime recap by liking, sharing, and commenting. And please subscribe to the channel to help us reach 5,000 subscribers.
Take you